So, Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you guys in Shul. It's a big one this week, Parashat Yitro, where we read the world's most famous 10 Commandments, all 10 Commandments. Now, when you think about the 10 Commandments, right, for the most part, I think it's fair to say, most of us consider that we have been keeping the 10 Commandments our whole life pretty much, right? None of you have been out there murdering and doing all those weird things, right? I haven't seen your names on the Epstein list, so you guys are good. All right? So for the most part, we've been keeping all of these 10 Commandments. Except for one for the most of your life. Especially those of us that are a bit older here at Shul. There's one of the commandments we only started keeping later on in life, and that would be this Sabbath. Right? Many of us, majority of us sitting here, old ones like us, not these youngsters, but the rest of us, we didn't grow up keeping the Sabbath. We used to keep the Sabbath on Sunday. Die Heilige Sondag. And back then, it looked kind of like a Sabbath, right? The shops used to be closed on Sundays. Like Chick-fil-A. Right? So it used to be closed on Sundays. And as time went on and we became more futuristic, they opened the shops on Sundays, but at least they still kept all the booze closed with the gates and they locked up the booze. But that's also gone with the wind. And today we sit here where it's a free-for-all, where there's no such thing as a Sabbath in our country anymore. It's just go do whatever you want, whenever you want. But we sit here today as a reformed congregation, not reformed, that sounds horrible. But anyway, a reformed people who are back to keeping the Sabbath, this time on the proper day of the week. And you guys are in shul listening to me in the Nati Singya instead of out there in the shops watching movies. So well done to you guys coming full circle. Once again, choosing a day in the week to cease from all your labor. What took us so long to get back to this point? From the point where Hashem spoke this commandment to us on Mount Sinai 3,000 plus years ago. What took you so long to get back here? To eventually say, oh yeah, when I say I'm keeping the 10 Commandments, I should probably keep all of them. What took you so long? So I want to start off today by telling you guys a kid's story. Judah's favorite bedtime story. So please don't fall asleep. It's about the Sabbath, and it's about a specific guy by the name of Yochanan ben Torta. You might know this story, but hang with me if you don't. And now Yochanan ben Torta, he actually appears twice in the Talmud. He has actually got some prominent sayings the two times that he appears. He is the one that tells us, for example, why the second temple was destroyed, because of our baseless hatred. Right? That's the one place we know him from. The other place we know him from was with Rabbi Akiva. When Rabbi Akiva decided to back that guy Bar Kokhba as the Messiah, this Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta told him, hey, but grass is going to grow out of your cheeks before that guy ever becomes the Messiah. So he's not the Messiah. So that's what he's known for in the Talmud. But there's another story in the Midrash from where is basically his origin story that I want to tell you guys about today. So, once upon a time, in the land far, far away, there was a Jewish farmer. This Jewish farmer had a beautiful farm. He had cows for milk. He had chickens for egg. He had sheep for wool. And he used his strongest cow to plow his fields and plant everything under the sun. Right? Might be your ancestor. Who knows? And this guy, a Jewish farmer, was farming away, and life was going well until one day a plague of famine struck his village. The rain no longer came, and it started struggling. The fields no longer bore as many fruits. The cows no longer gave as much milk. The sheep no longer grew as much wool. The chickens no longer gave as much eggs. And every Shabbos consecutively, his Shabbos table and the food on his Shabbos table became less and less and less. To the point where it became a financial crisis for him. So he had to make a decision. He decided it's time to sell his prized cow, the strongest cow he has, the one that plows his fields. So that Friday morning he goes to the local market to sell his cow. And lo and behold, one of his farming neighbors, a non-Jewish guy, sees this cow and sees it's the most beautiful cow he's ever seen. And he pays top dollar for this cow. The Jewish fellow sells his cow, goes home happy, and he can have a wonderful Shabbos meal. Now, the non-Jewish guy who bought the cow takes this cow back to his farm, puts the plow on it and starts plowing his field. And this cow ran like a John Deere. It plowed 3 times as much as any other cow he's ever worked with in his life. By the end of that day, this guy did a whole 2 months worth of work in one day with this amazing cow. He was so happy, he gave him a double portion of hay that night in the stable and went to sleep. The next morning he woke up, opened the stable, opened the barn to come and get the cow, and the cow wouldn't move. The cow just laid there. He tried everything. He put a rope around the horns to try and pull it out. He tried to get his family to push it from the back. He tried to bribe it with food. He tried everything in his power to get this cow to move, but the cow said, no. Moo, no. He's not going to move, is what he said, right? So this guy got fed up with trying to get this cow to work. So he decided he's going to walk just down the road to his neighboring Jewish farmer who sold him the cow to ask for his money back. So he came and knocked on the Jew's door. The Jew opened the door and said, Shalom Aleichem, good Shabbos. And the guy said, there's something wrong with your cow. You sold me a defective cow. Was it made in China? And the Jew said, I don't understand. There's nothing wrong with the cow. It's my prized cow. He says, no, listen to this. Yesterday you sold me the cow. I took it to my farm. It plowed magnificently. I was so happy with it. This morning I tried to take it out of the barn and it doesn't want to set foot outside the barn. And the Jewish farmer says, oh, I know what's going on. I taught my cow to keep Shabbos. You see, his whole life, this cow grew up not working on Saturday. Ain't gonna work on Saturday. He sang that song, right? Let me come with you to your farm and I'll talk to the cow. So he goes with a non-Jewish fellow back to his farm and he goes to the cow and he starts whispering in the ear of the cow. Apparently this guy can speak cow brew, whatever they speak in cow language. So he speaks to the cow and he says, listen, you cow, I know that I taught you all these years when you were on my farm one of the 10 commandments. It says, you shall do no labor on the Sabbath, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or even your livestock. So, when you were my cow, you were not allowed to work on the Shabbos. Now that I have sold you to this non-Jew, now you are technically allowed to work on Shabbos. So please, there's been a change of ownership. Do what is necessary. The cow got up, walked outside, and started plowing. Now, this guy that was watching this, the non-Jewish farmer, couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at the story and he had an epiphany of his own. He was so touched by seeing what this cow was able to do that he said to this Jewish farmer, he said, if a simple beast of the earth like this cow can learn to observe God's commandments, why can't I, as someone who is created in the image of God, also learn to keep the commandments and keep the Sabbath? So he spoke with his Jewish neighbor and he said to him, I want to learn about the Torah and I want to start keeping the Sabbath. And the Midrash says he became a great rabbi eventually. He became a ger, he converted, or became a ger, either a Toshav or a Tzedek, and he started keeping the Torah and he changed his name and his name became Yochanan ben Torta. What does his name mean? Yochanan ben Torta translates as Yochanan, the son of a cow. And that's how this rabbi got his name, Yochanan, the son of a cow. Now, if he's called the son of a cow for rediscovering the Sabbath, what do we call you guys? Let's try not to offend anyone today. So anyway, let's look at the story, right? So what he does, what is the realization that wakes him up to realizing that he should also keep the Shabbos? We call that in Jewish hermeneutical principles a kal vechomer, a light to the heavy argument. If so-and-so in the minor is true, then so-and-so in the major should be true as well. If a simple old cow, animal of the earth, can see the mitzvahs of Hashem and keep them, how much more so should a human being created in the image of God also keep His commandments, right? Now today I want to explore another kal vechomer just like that we find in the scriptures as well, that also talks about the Sabbath and the animals. But before we do that, let's just look at Mount Sinai and some of the miracles that happened in this week's parasha to get to a point I want to get to today. So, does anyone know which day of the week did we receive the Torah on Mount Sinai? Was it a Blue Monday? Was it a Taco Tuesday? What day of the week? Does anyone know? The Talmud tells us which day of the week we received the Torah. In Tractate Shabbos 86b, it tells us we received the Torah on Mount Sinai, obviously on Shavuot, so either the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan, but the day of the week, it was a Shabbos, which makes sense, right? If you're going to receive a revelation of the Torah from Hashem, let it be on the day that we have that extra soul, the extra megabytes and gigabytes to absorb the holiness of Hashem. Which also means that when Hashem spoke this commandment here, commandment number 4, that you shall keep my Sabbath, He gave it to us on the Sabbath itself. On the Sabbath, we received the Torah on Mount Sinai. Now this becomes very important because of another miracle that happened at the giving of the Torah. Because we came out of Egypt as a nation of slaves. What physical condition are slaves in? Bad ones. Usually starved. If you're working with bricks and working with your hands, You're missing a few limbs, right? Many of them were missing arms, missing fingers. Many of us were blind. Many of us were deaf. Many of us were lame and sick and had a whole bunch of issues. But, say our sages, through various midrashim, all over the midrash, it tells us, shortly before we received the Torah from Mount Sinai, Hashem healed every single ailment in the nation of Israel. If you were blind, you could automatically see. If you were missing a leg, it grew back like a lizard. Maybe we are lizard people, who knows? If you were deaf, your ears were open. If you were mute, you would start speaking in order to be fully complete and able to receive the Torah. That's what our sages say at Mount Sinai. No wonder all the hospitals overseas are called the Sinai Medical Center, right? It's based on this idea and this midrash that everyone was healed at Mount Sinai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai actually tells us, the moment we got healed was the moment we said the words, Na'aseh v'nishma. When God offered us the Torah and we said, we will listen and we will obey. As soon as we uttered those words, every single Israelite was healed. Now, where do they come up with this midrash? Usually the midrashim sound like they sucked it out of their thumb, but they're not like that. They can't just make up something out of nowhere. They get it from the text itself. What does the Torah tell us about the giving of the Torah? It tells us all of Israel saw the thunder on the mountain. If all of Israel saw it, then we can't have anyone blind in our congregation. Therefore, Hashem healed the blind. The Torah says, when God offered us the Torah, it says, we heard and we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will understand. Which means everyone was able to hear. All the deaf were healed. And we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, means all of those who were mute were also healed and their tongues were loosened. Those that were lame, the Torah says, we all stood as one at the foot of Mount Sinai. So, everyone that was walking like Captain Hook with a wooden leg, grew their legs back and we were able to stand there as complete human beings. We were all healed. And it's this beautiful imagery of what happens when you enter the presence of God. That within Him and around Him, there's no imperfections. That's why we got the mitzvah when it comes to the tabernacle as well. In the temple in the future, that someone that's a Kohen is not allowed to serve there if he has some sort of a deformity, right? So Hashem healed everyone so that He could dwell among us at that stage. Now, what I want to point out with these midrashim is that God healed the blind, the mute, the deaf, the lame, on which day of the week? On Shabbos, when He gave us the Torah. Are you allowed to perform healings on Shabbat? That's the question that Yeshua gets asked over and over again in the Gospels. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Christianity lost its connection to the Sabbath on Saturday over the centuries as well, because of all those discrepancies and those arguments and the debates about Yeshua and what He did on the Sabbath. Was He a Sabbath breaker or was He not a Sabbath breaker? And unfortunately, I think over the years, the church has lost the idea of the halakha behind what it means to keep the Sabbath, and therefore they decided that He broke the Sabbath over and over again, when actually He did the exact opposite. Because let's look at the healings that Yeshua performed on the Sabbaths, these ones that are up for debate. What kind of healings did He perform? He healed the blind, right? He spat in the mud and made spittle in His mixture for the eyes. He healed the deaf, He healed the mute, He healed the lame. He did the exact same miracles of healing that Hashem did at Mount Sinai when He gave us the Torah. The exact same thing. On the exact same day, Hashem gave us the commandment to keep the Sabbath and not do all of these malachot, these works, on the Sabbath day. So Yeshua constantly gets called out throughout the Gospels for His Sabbath healings. And even sometimes they're trying to set Him up for it. For example, let's have a look at a story from Luke chapter 14, verse 1, where they try to set Him up with a Sabbath healing, and He actually flips the question on them and asks them, are you allowed to heal on the Sabbath? So Luke chapter 14, verse 1. One Shabbos, Yeshua went to eat in the home of one of the leading Pharisees. So the leading Pharisees, this is going to be one of our famous sages from the Pirkei Avot that we studied. That was alive at the time of Yeshua. So they invited Him to his house for a Shabbos meal. And they were watching Him very closely. Why were they watching Him very closely? To see what He's going to do on Shabbat. It was a test. Listen to what they did. In front of Him, they placed a man whose body was swollen with fluid. Okay, not like me, I'm just fat. Someone who was sick, who had a problem, and his body was swollen with fluid. On purpose, they placed this guy opposite Yeshua. Yeshua spoke up and asked the Torah experts and the Pharisees. So He tells us that these are some of our greatest sages in Jerusalem at this stage. They were there at this meal. He asked them the question, does the Torah allow healing on Shabbat or not? So He sees what they've done. He sees their ploy here, and He asks them, does the Torah allow healing on Shabbat or not? But they said nothing. They don't want to incriminate themselves. So taking hold of the sick man, he healed him and sent him away. To them he said, which of you, if your son or your ox, your cow, falls into a well, will hesitate to haul him out on the Sabbath? And to these things they could give no answer. So what Yeshua is doing there is, once again, he's looking at the Sabbath laws, and he's looking at humans and cows and asking the question, what you do to a human or a cow, does that negate the keeping of the Sabbath? So the Talmud actually discusses this very problem. In Tractate Shabbos 128b, it discusses what should you do if your son or your ox falls into a pit on the Sabbath day. Are you allowed to come and help him out? And they decide you are allowed to carry things like pillows and mattresses and ropes to help get your cow out of the pit on the Sabbath. Are we allowed to carry stuff like that on Sabbath generally? No, it's actually forbidden. But they say the reason is it's a positive mitzvah to not let an animal suffer, whereas the breaking of the Sabbath is a negative mitzvah. So the positive mitzvah of decreasing the suffering of an animal overrides the Sabbath prohibitions in that very situation. Okay? Now look at what Yeshua says here in Matthew chapter 12. Here's a different way we read the verses differently. So Matthew chapter 12 is the chapter that's got all the different Sabbath-breaking stories of Yeshua. It starts off with a famous one of him and his disciples where they're picking the grain on the Shabbos and that whole story. And he gives this deep, insightful halachic argument as to why they didn't break the Sabbath when they picked the grain from the wheat that day. And then he goes and says that famous thing about man, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, because man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And he quotes his favorite verse in the entire Bible, Hosea 6 verse 6, where Hashem says to us, it is not, what I want from you is compassion more than animal sacrifices. So let's see what it says there in this other healing. Then he heals a guy with a withered hand. Matthew chapter 12, verse 9. Now, going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man there had a shriveled hand. Looking for a reason to accuse him of something, they asked Yeshua, is healing permitted on the Shabbos? But he answered, if you have a sheep that falls in the pit on Shabbat, which of you won't take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than that sheep? Therefore, what is permitted on Shabbat is to do good. What's Yeshua saying there? Notice the language that he uses there. He uses that exact same hermeneutical principle of a kal v'chomer. If so-and-so is true for an animal, how much more so for a human being who got the commandment to keep the Shabbat at Mount Sinai? Yeshua is doing a kal v'chomer again, answering that very question. Why? Because he sees that chesed towards an animal is allowed on the Shabbat, and the Sabbath was made to do good. Right? So what Yeshua does here is he defends the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos by looking at how we treat animals. Why? Because that's what the mitzvah says in this week's parashah. You shall keep the Sabbath, you shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, or the livestock, or the sojourner in your gates as well. Yeshua takes that mitzvah from the Ten Commandments and he defends the Sabbath halachically, correctly. He doesn't do away with the Sabbath, he defends it. And he looks at the way that Hashem healed human beings, specifically on the Sabbath, when he gave us the commandment of the Sabbath. So that's the core behind the mitzvah of the Sabbath, is to do good on the Sabbath. So, Sabbath-keeping cows, they're pretty cool. What's even better than a Sabbath-keeping cow? A Sabbath-keeping person. So I say to all of you Sabbath keepers, Shabbat Shalom, you son of a cow.